and action. And welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly episode 191. This is the last episode before our holiday break. So we'll be away, I guess, 3 weeks or something like that. We'll see. Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
What are we going to do?
I don't, what my Mondays, come on. So
all the time, right?
But yeah, it's better to have a break because getting visitors during the holiday season is a bit difficult, so that's complicated. But it is now, what is it? It is 12th of December, and this is going to be released on 13th of December on Tuesday. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a product manager in Microsoft 365 product platform areas. And with me as a co-host is...
Hi, everybody. My name is Waldek Mastykarz, and I am developer advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
Excellent. And typically in the show, like always, we have a visitor in place. Who's the visitor this time?
Julia Kasper.
Who's Julia? Who's Julia Kasper?
Julia is a PM at Microsoft. She is in the dev, which is the part of Microsoft that builds tools for devs. Yep. And she focuses on Fusion Dev, among other things. So we would love to talk to her about all things Fusion Dev, where it's going, what's in, what's out, what's relevant, what are the trends, and what people should pay attention to.
Yes, absolutely. And then after Julia interview, we will jump on the weekly articles. Not that many articles this time, but I guess we're heading to the holiday season, so we see less and less activities from people, which is good. That means that people are resting. So which is super important as well. But as you're writing something, or if you're on Twitter, please do hashtag PnP Weekly so we understand what are you publishing. But for now, let's jump on the interview with Julia. So welcome, Julia, on the PnP Weekly. I think it's episode 191. We just did record the intro of this one. Yes, it is still. But thank you, Julia, and joining us on the PnP Weekly. You've been traveling actually as well, if I understood the start discussion going. But let's actually recap that in a second. And can you do first a quick intro, who you are and what do you do for a living?
Okay, for sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Waldek and Vesa, for having me on the show. And my name is Julia. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Developer Division. I'm overlooking the developer experience for using low-code tooling. So that's kind of my end-to-end scenario. I'm an end-to-end program manager, but we have lots of fun words for different types of program management. But I'm super passionate about developers using, or what are some of the scenarios that developers can be doing using low-code tooling. So yeah, I've been traveling a bit. I've been talking to a lot of the community, or a lot of the folks outside of the Microsoft ecosystem around this. I am collaborating a lot with our partner teams on the Microsoft Power Platform, because it is a cross-org scenario. So it's very important that different orgs with different services and products in it do talk and do collaborate about different things, which can be very challenging from time to time, even though we all want Microsoft, communication is key, right? But I absolutely love the job and love working with all our partner teams on the different organization spectrum.
Now, let's clarify a bit about the role. You said the low-code tooling. Does that mean Power Platform only, or is that more than the Power Platform? Just to be super clear on what does the low-code actually mean?
Mm-hmm. So low code, how Microsoft defines it, also from our eco perspective view, we have different tools. So one is logic apps, and the other one is the whole ecosystem around the Power Platform. My role in particular is looking at the end-to-end scenario, everything related to the Microsoft Power Platform. And we do have a lot of great PMs on the logic apps team, and we do feel like more developers are interested in this already. So that's why I'm kind of new to the spectrum, overlooking the end-to-end scenarios for the Microsoft Power Platform, and there in particular Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agent.
Yeah. And what does the overall feature PM, what does it actually mean? So what do you do for actually, what does it mean in practice? What do you do for a living? Just to clarify, because it's like, I coordinate this thing, sure, but what does that mean?
Yeah, no, I know, and it can be very confusing, even for me internally, because it is a highly collaborative role for sure. So in the Microsoft Developer Division, we do have two different types of program managers. One are very classical feature PMs, which are like, okay, this is my product, this is my, even within products, you own certain features. So they are in particular overlooking a certain feature or a certain product. Microsoft figured out a few years ago, which is, it is great to have feature PMs, but it isn't so great from a customer perspective, because of course we only look at our products itself and we don't really look beyond the cosmos there. So that's why they started to have so-called end-to-end PMs, which are then more interested in the customer story. So I'm talking about the customer in my use case, talking about the developer perspective itself. But my job kind of is to define what is the end-to-end story that developers could be interested in using low-code tooling, and what different products are involved in this end-to-end story. Because typically, and that's also something we are seeing with a lot of customers, it's not just one product. As much as we wish it would be only one product, or it would be only Microsoft, most likely that isn't the case. So we are trying to get different folks from different product areas together and thinking about what we want to achieve there, and then figuring out, well, what is the next step for a certain product, but also for the end-to-end story.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Now I actually finally I understood after 16 years what is my role, because I'm not a feature PM either, but I'm a PM, so apparently good to know.
Just don't know what.
Apparently I fall on that bucket.
I think I wanted to ask you, Julia, looking at the past few years, how do you see developers' work evolve to kind of encompass these low-code technologies, right? Because like originally, when somebody would say dev, like you would instantly associate a person who writes code. How has that changed in the last few years?
Oh, I love the question. So I think it didn't really change even the last few years. I mean, if we look back even a little bit further, we had classical or typical developers just focusing on back-end development. We had typical developers just looking at front-end technologies. Then we had this whole motion about full stack, and ideally you should basically be able to do everything. And now with low-code tooling, it means, okay, you as a developer, you don't just have to understand all of your back-end, front-end, full-stack technologies that you're already using, but you should also use now different tools like low-code as well. So over the last couple of years, I think low-code became more popular, definitely in a business area. And that's also something we're still seeing, some kind of a bias from developers using low-code tooling or hearing about it for the first time, which totally makes sense. I mean, low-code, if we look at it, it definitely isn't the friendliest name itself, especially from a developer perspective, because initially you think like, okay, low code, this means I don't get to do what I'm passionate about, and I don't, I'm not being used in a way. So ideally, Microsoft marketing would have promoted it a different way. But something we are seeing is that more and more developers or more technical people are getting interested in using those tools, because at the end of the day, it's just another tool in the tool set, and whatever kind of gets the work done that you maybe liking to do, or maybe you just have to do. At some point, you're just looking at different tools that you can be using and is benefiting your work-to-work or your day-to-day work.
Now, I just got an idea for how we can name it differently in a way that would be more appealing to devs. And you heard it here first. Low auth code. Developers hate dealing with auth.
That's true. That is true.
An all-powered platform. Click, you have a connector, done. And it's there.
Yep.
And works. While you don't need to write code, you don't need to write auth code. That sells me immediately on it.
And it's basically all of the baseline code is being provided for you, focus on business logic. But now, coming back on, I need to ask the elephant in the room about the elephant in the room. There's no elephant in the room, I guess. Hopefully there isn't. But is the low code, is it that then a threat for the pro developer, or what is the future direction given the growing demand for building solutions? Is this going to actually devalue then the pro developer work, or what's happening?
So definitely what we don't want to do is we don't want to educate or make pro developers citizen developers, because I mean, looking at the graph, or like the skills you will need in the futures, we don't have enough developers, so it wouldn't be the smartest thing to make them citizen developers. So kind of where their role comes is low code tooling is a great way to get a lot of the jobs done easily, but not all of the jobs, because it is low code tooling. So it is an ecosystem and you can use certain features, certain things in a very certain way. But from time to time, and especially talking to a lot of customers, there always needs some kind of customization, some more extended features, especially if we think about all of the Azure service or all of the things that you want to connect your local tooling with. And this is where the pro developer or the typical developer comes in and is enabling these solutions and is helping business side, or maybe even is making the business side just explore these solutions better. And it's more about working together in the future rather than working in a silos ways and just making it faster for everyone in the circle.
You actually said it in your answer, just to elaborate that a bit. So as we know, and Julia was referring to the growth curve of a demand for developers, we cannot train developers fast enough to actually address the demand for developers, and that's where the low-code, no-code solutions come really in, so that the customers can still do business and automate business processes, even though they cannot hire a pro developer or a developer because they just doesn't exist anymore. There isn't enough of them. So just to this does not mean that the pro development would be going away, even though every now and then our marketing is pretty black and white. And that's also something after a while in Microsoft, in ecosystem, everything goes in cycles. Right now, everything is like no code, nothing else matters. And it's like, well, that's a great Metallica song, by the way, but it's not the reality. So it's within a few years, and the pendulum moves to another direction. And of course, the pro developers are always needed, so that's not going to go away. So.
Oh no, for sure. And maybe also to add something to that is, ideally in the future, and I know this is a very high skilled or something we haven't seen a lot with a lot of customers just yet, but it might even become more collaborative. So for example, if IT or a development organization, they get new requests and they can already see their backlog totally being filled, and they just see another request coming in saying, hey, we need another application. And maybe at this point they're like, oh, the requirements aren't as crazy, and maybe we can bring in somebody from the business side as well and helping us develop this, because we just don't, if we now have to do this all by ourselves as well, it's just more and more work we have to do. And this is where this whole collaborative or fusion development area might come in, and it's more about working together and building these apps together in the future.
And that is also
Waldek first, then
right? Because it also means that developers or enterprise devs, right, have to think very much API first. Do you see people do that already? Right? Because like if they build something and that doesn't expose an API, Power Platform or Fusion, that like there's nothing to connect to. So to what extent do you see necessity for a shift to happen yet, where folks will get the mindset of API first? Or to what extent do you think, well, we are there already. We are already thinking API first. And with that, it's like very easy step to enable non-pro devs to build apps on that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So I think even before API first, or maybe at the same time, it becomes more trend towards microservices in general, because if we look at architecture right now, it's like historically we built something and now we're just adding and just making this crazy historic back-end architecture here. And rather than thinking about, okay, re-architecture into microservices that then at some point can be ending up as APIs and can then be consumed not just by developers itself, but maybe also of those low-code citizen developers, will definitely help talking about the story and how to consume those backend services with different types. I'm just calling it different types of front end or different types of tooling itself, which can be pro code, which can be low code, but maybe a first shift into thinking about microservices first, which can be or which are APIs in general, but it's more the trend towards microservices. And from there, it's a good approach to then think about how can we connect these microservices, and depending on the requirements or depending on the use case, maybe it's for low code, maybe it's for, no, this doesn't work, and now we need our dev or our engineers working with it from a more pro code perspective. So that's how I would get started with it.
I think one of the things, so when I first kind of got involved a bit on the Power Platform, it's like, okay, so I need to always build a connector and I need to be able to connect it to APIs, and then I can get to do the other things. And I to be honest, sure, that's true, but that's not the right mindset. In the enterprise scale, we should be thinking about the microservices and APIs, like I said, and then we need those pro developers. Then we need somebody who understands those APIs to provide the connectors in place, and you can have that connector factory in place within the enterprise level. And then you will have a funnel of even more business application designers who don't need to understand where the data is coming from or how the data comes from. They just use the connector in place. So you don't, as you build your Power App, you don't always start by creating a connector and then the Power App. What if the connectors are in place and you basically have the baseline service layer within your enterprise? And that's where your business specialists and business and the low-code developers can just take advantage of what's behind the scenes. And that's maybe potentially, I'm just brainstorming, maybe we have all of these plans in place and guidances, but we should kind of have a white paper for enterprise level team structure and planning and how you should be thinking these layers rather than just Power App and a connector and an API. So I don't know if you have that. Are you able to follow up on what I'm actually saying?
No, yeah, I totally agree, and I would love to see the white paper myself for sure as well, because that's also something we have been seeing with a lot of customers or out there, how people do it right now. It's very siloed. It's exactly. Power Apps, and we have to just now work with Power Apps, whereas kind of the idea what we want to do is, well, how about services and different types of connection you can build up on those services, and then whatever tooling fits or whoever is going to be working on this application can then work with it. If it's somebody on the low-code side, then that's perfect, because then we can use the other person who would be working on it from our engineering team doing something else. And it also comes into preference too, right? I mean, every person likes to work in a certain way. So for example, if somebody is super passionate about opening up their Visual Studio every day and they don't want to use any other tooling, then yes, that's perfectly fine as well.
Exactly.
What about other people, for example, on the business side who are used to PowerPoint and now they're coming over to the Power App side, and that's kind of where they feel at home now too. So yeah.
So, and as long as I have the connector in place, then tens and tens of Power Apps developers or connector or automation developers can actually take advantage of it. It does require a certain set of mindset thinking, a bit of a switch on the, okay, how do we do this in an enterprise scale or in enterprise level?
But I mean, like, it isn't different. Like, so a while back, I made the analogy that, you know, where in the past in Office, we would have the macros we would build in VBA. It's basically the same automation, but then in a cloud. So you're not automating inside a file. You're now automating on the data that are still for work, but that are stored in a cloud. And then you combine that. And then the cool thing is, right, that you can also now bring in your LOB, right? So it doesn't need to be just like you first need to get all of the things you want to work on into a file like an Excel sheet, Access database, or whatever we had in the past, and only then you can do things on top, right? Like nowadays with connectors, we kind of expand the limits of that to kind of the workplace, because it isn't even M365. It's any resource that is exposed through an API.
Yeah. Also, something I like about this idea is the topic of scalability, right? Before, and if we think about VBA here, it was very much local development. You had it within your Excel sheet, and you're the only one knowing about this great macro. Maybe somebody else heard it, then you're sharing it via your however you shared it. But then now if we think about more from a scalability level, I can create a connector and then I can push it to a Power Platform environment, for example, and all of the folks who have access to this Power Platform environment, they can at least see it. It doesn't necessarily mean they have access to it, but at least they are aware, okay, something has been going on, or I might get access to some certain types of data. And it, I think in general, helps organizations also from the transparency or building applications faster, especially if we look at the challenge of demand and not having enough skilled people out there who can support such scenarios.
Yeah.
It also, as you cough.
Yes.
It almost sounds like way in the past, we already had in enterprise, the service catalog idea where there would be an IT managed catalog of services and APIs and things that they would offer to business. And in a way, it sounds to me like Power Platform connectors become that. They're kind of the way IT can, with a really low effort, advertise to business what different things they have to offer.
Sure. This is kind of a classic storyline of back in early 80s. It was a different set of things. Late 80s, a different set of things. But every single
pigeons and owls.
Well, but every single decade, every single, let's say, there's always a trend. How are we going to do this enterprise catalog of services? And of course, Power Platform connectors, one way of doing that, but that's only for the Power Platform connectors. So most likely there's for Power Platform usage and the logic app and all of that. Maybe there's a separate layer again of publishing the services. But it's actually kind of that's one of the holy grails of enterprise development has always been, how do we do the catalog of services and how do we make them available for everybody? And it's actually interesting. It moves on the cycle. Exactly.
And documentation and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
5 years and there's another way of doing that again. And 5 years, another trend is coming.
Which is good. It means we're learning.
Yeah, I guess we are. So
I hope we are.
Now, Julia, that was really good discussion on what are you doing right now and all of that. Can you explain a bit, how did you get to do what you're doing right now? And where are you based in, not in US, in Redmond? How did that happen? Can you talk about your history? How do you get to work on things, what you work on?
Yeah, for sure. So before I joined Microsoft in the US, so Microsoft as a program manager in Seattle, I used to work as a Microsoft consultant back in Germany in our lovely Munich office. I went to customers, or at least they booked us via engagement, and we helped them to implement different types of solutions. So I did some SharePoint development. I started building, we had a huge bot hype in Europe. I'm not sure if it's still there, but at least whenever I was, every customer wanted to have some kind of bot development. So I did a lot of bot teams development for some of our customers. And at some, especially as a customer, you always need to be in engagements, because that's, you need to bill your hour. Everyone who has been working in consultancy definitely knows. So at some point I started the trend of bot development decreasing. And I was like, well, what are some other opportunities that customers are currently interested in? And that's when I heard for the first time about Power Platform and low-code tooling. And I remember my manager, she told me about this, and she's like, hey, Julia, like, we have a really great engagement with one of our customers in Germany. Are you interested in? And my first comment was, oh no, low code tool, like, I don't do that. So I had the same bias. Yes, I had the same bias everyone else had. But I started to skill myself up. I started to learn a little bit more about this, and I talked to, of course, talked to our customers about that, talked about like some of the scenarios that they wanted to do. And I came across the same challenges, and we are still seeing is, okay, the customer has a perfect picture of the app or the thing that they wanted to implement. But you always, with low code tooling, you do come to a certain point, and at some point you need to extend it, and that's where you need those pro code code pieces. And I had a very typical example, and they wanted to connect to an on-prem database. We didn't know how to do it because it didn't have the connector in the Power Platform ecosystem. So I had to build a web API, had to deploy it as a custom connector, and then it was the perfect Fusion story. I did the Fusion story, and it was horrible because I had so many things I had to go through, and I started to reach out to a lot of PMs on back in Redmond, and I was like, hey, this isn't working, like, couldn't we make this better? I had a different idea here. Of course, at the beginning, people with my European directness, they were like, hold up, like, this is really something we need. But then I ended up with my manager, who then later reached out to me again. But I ended up with him, and we had a really, really great chat. I think it was initially for 30 minutes, but then we ended up talking 1 hour. And I basically complained to him all about the things that didn't really work. And I had so many ideas how we can make it better. And I think 2 weeks later, he reached out to me again, and he's like, hey, Julia, we are actually searching for somebody, for an end-to-end PM who basically does whatever you are doing already, but you keep
a lot. You are now going to fix it.
You're now going to fix it. And that's how I ended up in Redmond. I ended up in originally because with COVID happening and everything, we thought about me just staying in Munich and working from there. But then, and I know we talked about this already, with different teams and different time zones, it just very much made sense for me to be moving to the US. And yeah, that's how I ended up in Redmond. I'm still complaining a lot.
yeah, but that's brilliant, right? Like you have firsthand, like you're not, it's not a theory exercise. Like you had firsthand experience going through that, suffering the pains, paper cuts, as they're called, and now you kind of are in place where you can address all of them. So I think it makes really,
that's really good.
It doesn't get better than that, right? And I'm interested also, how do you stay in touch with that? Because like as you get to fix things, how are you keeping up with the new experiences and new places to fix?
Yeah, I think it definitely helped that I used to work in the field, how we call it, because I still very much benefit from those connections. I'm still trying to make sure to reach out to the people I used to work with, or even starting to reach out to more people that I know that are in the same area. I also want to make sure that I'm making sure that at least once or twice a week I'm talking to customers, because I think they are the ones providing actual feedback to us. So I'm making sure that I'm still trying to stay in touch with customers or partners, because I think they do provide the real feedback, because we have our Microsoft lens on and we're like, oh, this is how it's supposed to work, but it never is. So yeah.
The amount of time you're showing somebody, like back in a few years ago when there was conferences and everything else, and then there was engineering people with there, and then you go to meet the partners and show them that, hey, did you know the partners built this? And what? What are they building? So we never intended that to be used like that. Yeah, but yeah, okay, fine. That's a typical discussion. Now, can we go back a bit on for the closure of the discussion, pick on the Fusion development and the work what you do right now? What does that mean? What are we? Is there something what we can talk about? What are we building in the VS Code or VS to make the Fusion dev easier? So, what does that mean? In practice?
So me starting, and like I started as a PM last year in January, the first thing I did is, first of all, writing down all of my feedback. But of course, I also have my biases. I'm also doing things in a certain way. So I started to interview other developers across the world and trying to figure out what are some of the struggles they are going through. And then we wrote a white paper about it. We shared it with different teams, and we came up with a few things related to products that we feel like these are things necessary to drive the Fusion story or to drive local pro developers using low-code tooling. So something we are currently working on is, for example, how to get started even as a developer. So right now, if I look at any of the IDEs, we do have a Power Platform extension in Visual Studio Code, but we don't have anything in Visual Studio yet. So that's something we have been working on. And especially if we think about web API development, I mean, especially with the .NET community, right, which is huge, and which are typically using Visual Studio. We know, like, we know we have developers all over the place, but we also wanted to create a space there that just gets them started easily and figuring out and trying those different kinds of tooling as well. And we also, from a Azure API management perspective, because that's kind of the hub. I know we talked about it, so it's the catalog, trying to combine different services within an organization to make the integration part from there easier as well. Because we know a lot of customers are concerned, or security and governance is always a big topic and is something we should be aware of. So we want to also make a secure and governed way to expose your web APIs in a more scalable level as well. And this is why we chose Azure API Management as a connecting service there to get your APIs into the Power Platform side as well.
Yep, makes perfect sense. Now, if I drill in a bit more, so how are we planning to, what are the tooling doing? What is the VS Code tooling doing? How is it making things easier for developers? What is the magic?
Mm-hmm. So the ideal picture is I'm opening up my Visual Studio, I'm opening up an ASP.NET Web API project, and we have our great page of connected services. So in the future, you can easily just connect your local project to a Power Platform environment. And then, because now with dev tunnels, it's a new feature that the Visual Studio team just released. As soon as they hit F5, and now we are just talking about the inner loop, right? So I'm still on my local machine. I'm still developing within my inner loop. But as soon as I hit F5, I want to see how this is being consumed or what I can do on the Power Platform side. So this will then initially create a custom connector, or basically the wrapper around my web API, and I'm then able, while I still have it running on my local machine, to start exploring and connecting it with my Power App there, or even with my Power Automate flow, if that's something I want to test and try out as well. So you are able to test and debug it while running locally. If we think about even further, because that's the inner loop, right? If we now think about the loop after the outer loop, not the outer loop, it's all about the fruity loop. If you think about the outer loop, it's how do I then, from publishing my web API, how do I then get it into the Power Platform side as well? And right now we have a great story with Azure API Management in place, but we all know not every customer is, of course, using this service. So there should be another and maybe even easier way to also create a custom connector just whenever you deployed it to any kind of cloud service.
Yeah, basically it's being an extension of your CICD pipe, right? The moment you publish an API from there, you basically have a target. You push your code, and you can also push a connector.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. I don't know. That makes sense.
Right now, you would be surprised how many people still right-click publish in Visual Studio, even though our best practice, of course, is having a good CI/CD pipeline in place. Yep. But I personally was surprised seeing the numbers, how many people still press the right-click publish button.
I wonder with that, to what degree that is kind of the same thing where way back when, there was a research done that the most popular type of app built in VS was a Windows Form app. And it was like, why? Well, because that's the easiest way to build an app. Click a button and have a piece of code run. Yeah. Right. So I wonder to what degree that's kind of that, or is it really that people build production APIs and publish from a local box?
Yeah. It's surprising. And that's what I mean about still being in contact with customers or our end users, right? Because they are going to show you how they actually are using our tooling. I know we have those crazy plans and whatever we want it to be, but it definitely makes sense to have some interviews with them afterwards and seeing how they are using it and if this is really helping them and is solving their business problems.
Yeah, a classic example, just you need to bridge the gap of the existing users to the vision which you have. So you don't actually jump aboard like 5 years and they're like, no. So a super classic example still makes me smile because I was working already at Microsoft at the time. Whenever we released Microsoft, Windows Azure the first time, it was all PaaS services, platform as a service services. There was no IaaS, there was nothing because we basically thought that community and ecosystem would be ready to jump on the PaaS and platform as a service model, and they weren't. So and that's why we lost a lot of the customers who went to AWS because they had infrastructure as a service. It makes no sense in the longer run to use infrastructure as a service because just it doesn't if you can get rid of it. But customers and partners like, well, I don't understand that. I need to have a VM. I need to have a computer. I need to sign it. I need to look into that. So you need to kind of bridge the gap. And quite often, some of us work in a Redmond, the Redmond bubble takes you away, and then it's like, well, of course, everybody is in this Redmond bubble thing. No, so it's good to have that connection with the real world.
Yeah, but it's also this, duality between, yes, you want to innovate and you want to show people a better way of doing things, sure. But if you are too many steps ahead of them,
exactly.
Well, then it's really hard to bring them along, right? Because they are here. And they need to be there, and the first step is here, not directly there, right? So You have to have also the reality check where they are and what is the first step there. I mean, maybe the easiest thing is exactly to take your on-prem workloads, put them on a VM in Azure, and that is your first step towards the cloud, from which you will step by step expand it to microservices and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean. Yeah, one step at a time, but I think it's also important to have a vision, where you want, especially as a program manager that is working with a lot of feature PMs, is trying to get across the vision you at some point have. And if it does take, and especially at Microsoft, does take 10 years or 5 years, but at least something you're working towards. And this doesn't, it can always change on the way, right? Especially talking to customers and talking to different people who are using it. This can change, but at least from a vision perspective, it's nice to have something like this and thinking about the developer perspective in these scenarios as well.
Yep, absolutely. And that helps an alignment within inside of Microsoft as well, because quite often we need to work across multiple organizations and conflicting interests and all of that, which is a bit complicated. So good. From a timing perspective, we typically do this in every single interview. What's happening this week? Anything interesting? I can see from the background clock that it's 3:44 in your location, so you are in Germany. So
yes.
No, I am in the US and just put my clock as if it was in Germany. Because jet lag.
It's pretty bright on, 6:45 in Seattle. So well, on summertime, that could be the Seattle sun, but anyway.
That's true. It's nice to have some German sun here for sure. But no, I'm in Germany. I think the biggest challenge always is traveling back, is working different time zones. So my day actually just started maybe 2 or 1 hour before our call was. So and especially typically before holidays, I'm trying to focus more on the strategic work, like writing documentation, writing some strategy papers about where we are with our tooling right now, what we want to do. Today, I actually have a call with another customer because we have a new linking, or at least in private preview for next year, from Azure API Management to the Power Platform. So right now we want to get some customers on board who are willing to test it and give us feedback. So we have our kickoff call with them today. So that's always super interesting because we get to tell them kind of what is in private preview. We get to show them a demo, and they are usually also super excited about all the things that are coming. So that always definitely makes my day for sure.
Cool.
Really, really cool. Now, and of course, you'll be in Germany for the holiday season. Is that the case? Just out of curiosity, but any time off on the upcoming weeks for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, during Christmas, everything slows down here anyways. Yeah. And especially if you make such a far trip, I'm taking 2 weeks off, just being with family and friends, which is always nice, because now that I live in overseas, you don't get to see them that often anymore. Sure. So yeah, I'm super excited about that too.
Sure. Waldek, what about you? This is the last episode before we close up for the holiday season.
Oh my God, that's a big thing right now. So another year of this show, another year of us talking to each other every week, at least once a week. Oh my God.
Every single week. It's just
at least once.
Always the same.
Once, sometimes 8 times, right? This week, so despite everybody saying like things slow down, like I'm not seeing it. On the opposite, things get crazy. Like I'm getting so much work to like new ideas, new things that I want to do right now, because I know that in week or 2 weeks people will be gone. It's like we need to do it now. So I'm trying to cram as much as I can into the last days. But yeah, I will be off the last day or the last week of the month. So I'm taking some time away too. But until then, it's all hands on deck and doubling down on all of the work that I have done and that I want to do now, ideally today, which will not be the
case. You always want to do all of the work on one day, right?
Yeah. Yes.
More ideas than hours in a day, unfortunately.
Yeah, my calendar is full of like placeholders, and that's like I didn't have a time to do that. Well, fine, I'll do it tomorrow. Then
a while back, I had the idea to organize my work. So I had this separate list to do named 3 things, and it was supposed to hold the 3 days or 3 things for me to do in a day. I ended up having like 8 items in a 3 items to do in a day list. It's like, you know what, that's not gonna work.
Yes, it's pretty hard. Now, I have to say, since we are closing for the holiday, and we go to the articles in a second, and we'll talk about that one in a bit as well, but the first episode of PnP Weekly was actually 17th of August, 2018. So it's been pretty long time.
What have we been doing then? So 2018, Teams was already a thing. Power Platform wasn't a thing, I think.
No, I don't think that was a thing. I don't think it even existed.
Yeah, it's only 4 years, but it's already 4 years.
Yeah. That stuff evolves. Anyway,
you guys are still friends, which is a good thing. After.
Are we? Or is it an act? So you never know. No. In my case, I will be actually working on throughout the holiday, so which is not too bad because there's not working too much, but catching up on things. It's a great opportunity for actually cleaning up things in a non-stressful situation.
For you to get to inbox 0.
No, that's not going to happen for sure. I already know.
Control A, delete inbox 0.
That would be one way of doing that. So it is what it is. So after being in a roles for a long time, it's just impossible to do that. But to be fair, I still don't understand, for example, how Jeff Teeper does that. So he keeps on responding and promoting and responding emails and everything. It's like, how do you?
He probably has a thing with 3 things to do in a day, and he's better than
maybe.
But that's why they are leaders, right?
That's true. That is true. That's true. That is so true. Anyway, thank you, Julia, for a great discussion. Enjoy the time off. Really, really good to catch up. We'll get you again on the show some point to talk about, and talk about what was then released and what are the things, what is now being used and all of that stuff. It's a good way of coming back on what we were, following up on your promise. Was it actually delivered or not? Just kidding. So
I would love that. No, make me accountable. And also, if I'm always happy to hear feedback, not just obviously from you guys, but everyone who has been listening in and is a complainer as I am. I love to meet fellow complainers because that's how we learn. So feel free to reach out.
I use improvenist as the term for that. So which is I identify myself as an improvenist. It's not that you need to be perfect, but you can always improve. So that's why it's not about complaining. It's about providing constructive feedback.
I like that
Improvenist club. Hello. I am anonymous improvinist.
Anonymous improvinist.
And I have an idea.
I'm going to steal that term now, Vesa. I'm going to be an improvinist as well.
Okay, sounds good. But thank you, Julia, for this one. And as said, have a great holiday and get some rest, and all the best for the role and the new year.
Yeah, thank you. Super excited about everything that's coming.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Julia, one more time on the discussions. Really, really cool stuff, and happy holidays as well. Good to get some time away. Or, well, if people don't have time away, they will have a less, at least, to do, hopefully, during holiday season. At least in my case, it seems that I have time to catch up on things, which is good. But let's actually jump on the weekly articles and go them through what do we have there. So let me share my screen. Let's start from a Microsoft Teams blog. Frontline workers using shared devices can now use Edge and Yammer apps in the Android on Android alongside Teams. So basically, this is the direction where we are investing, which is more and more frontline worker-based capabilities and making sure that our applications are more streamlined for the mobile experiences as well, because quite a lot of actually workforce don't sit in the front of the desktops, right? And it's actually kind of interesting when I think about it. At some point, we were talking a lot about information workers, which was the primary objective of Microsoft. And sure, they're still one of the big areas, but nowadays more and more we can see that we're expanding the services and offerings and features to the frontline workers. So cool to see investments in these areas as well. Now, we also had a new blog post around the Microsoft Whiteboard mobile apps.
Exactly. So again, right, it's being productive and effective on the go on your phone, right? So, and in this case, being able to have a whiteboard, so a place where you can sketch, take notes, brainstorm with others. And this is about is it update or is it a release? Is it initial release of the app to it seems like a new app.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have a new app for iOS and Android that allows you to have the whiteboard experience on the go.
Yep, really, really cool. And it seems to be actually pretty nicely implemented. So you can do a lot of stuff in the mobile phones as well. So it gets more and more natural to just use the mobile phone, which is kind of nice. Even though, of course, I love the 3-screen, 5-screen setup what I have, but if you don't have that option. So
one screen ought to be enough for everybody.
Sure, whatever. Now, on the Power Automate side, there was a December 2022 update on the Power Automate for desktop. And nice blog post from Yannis Mavridis around the different updates which are coming out as part of this release. So not a massive amount of things, but new capabilities every single month to get available. I, by the way, love the fact that they are having kind of a monthly schedule and communications, and it's clear expectations, all of that stuff, which is that there's just a monthly summary, that it's coming, you will be shared what's actually new, which is really, really cool. On the independent publisher connector side, we had some updates as well.
Exactly. So in November 2022, we released apparently 13 new independent connectors, right? So these are the connectors for APIs that are already built by someone else, and then community builds the connectors that aren't available there yet. So this is all geared towards the ability for folks to use APIs in Power Apps, Power Automate Flows, Logic apps to more easily use these APIs that are already available.
Yep, really, really cool. And I can say Troy Taylor once again has shared quite a few of the things. So Troy is really, really, really helping people to get APIs connected to the Power Platform. So really, really awesome stuff. Thank you. And of course, thank you for everybody else who are sharing their knowledge and skills and here as well. Now, we also had an update from the Power Apps community, Power Apps engineering side around automate deployments with pipelines in Power Platform, now in preview. And this is now one step at a time heading to more and more to the direction where the Power Apps are more, how would I say it, in a nice way, enterprise ready, maybe. Is that a nice way of saying that? Well, they are enterprise ready already, but to get more ALM governance, processes, all of that in place. And of course, the pipelines is a one step forward on that. So making sure that you can deploy and automate steps as part of the Power App development cycle. Really, really cool stuff. Good, and by the way, there's a nice Microsoft Mechanics video on that one as well, so which is really, really cool. So let's do that and just get it and make sure that it's actually listed in our list of things, so we don't actually miss it. Now, we also had a update related on App Manifest Schema for Microsoft Teams. What is this? What? Help me.
Right. So basically, the manifest describes the shape of your app, right? So when you build an app for Teams, you have your code that runs somewhere in a cloud, SharePoint, whatever you want to, right? And then you also have the package with the manifest and icons, and the manifest has info about your apps, such as name, display name, description, but also the things that this app does. Does it have a bot? Does it have a tab, messaging extension, task module, whatever, right? So all of that is in the manifest. And as we introduce new things to Teams, right, and Teams apps, that manifest evolves as well with additional options. So this time around, we have another version with new options. So if you're interested to see what's new, check it out.
Absolutely, and kind of a related, well, not directly related, but in some sense related. It's related, but not directly one-to-one dependency on it. Is the JavaScript library for Teams. So there's a new version 2.6 available on that one, which has an additional capabilities. So you can access again additional capabilities and additional things. And of course, this is available at NPM as well, which isn't mentioned on the release notes. But you know, it's you have to go to the release on the root of the repo. You'll see all of the details where is it available and how to get started on using that, all documented as well. Now, then Luisa Fries had a really nice blog post related on something what you've been playing around as well, related on Craft Toolkit.
Exactly, right. So a while back, and we even did a demo of this on Community Go. I built kind of the same thing that you have available in Outlook, which is a way for you to pick a few folks from your org and plan a meeting and find a meeting time, plan a meeting. And that was kind of a control that you could build, you could integrate in your own app that you connect to Microsoft 365. Now, in this article, Luisa kind of takes a concept, but then she built that in Power Apps. And it's really cool to see like how closely it resembles the thing that I built on MGT, right? Because like in this case, she doesn't use an MGT, right? Like she builds everything from scratch. Yeah. And it's really cool to see like how close it is.
Sure. Really awesome stuff. And it's great to see that we get more of this consistency and the experiences. And of course, now, as long as we can, and whenever it's in a roadmap pipeline, hopefully will happen at sooner or later, that we can actually publish components and controls for Power Apps. And at that point, encapsulating all of these as reusable controls is a awesome thing to do. For right now, that's a bit of a complicated thing to actually get started. So you cannot just simply download a JSON definition or something and voila, use it as a component. That's not how it works. Even though there's some ways of doing that, but it's a bit more complicated than just referencing a set of controls. Maybe at some point, who knows? But really awesome to see the development in here. Now, Search Explains, which is Agnes Molnar, had a new blog post related on introduction to keyword query language. This is something which we played with for quite a long time, hasn't it, Waldek? So
definitely. It's been around for a long time, and yet it is invaluable, even more today than in the past, right? Because like, given the scale of the cloud, like we no longer go to like, give me files from this site. Like you don't query a site, you use search, because where the files are stored is less important to you being able to find them, right? And in a cloud, indexing happens really fast, right? So you have this almost instant indexing. The moment you create a file, it is there. And with KQL, that's basically the language, how you talk to search to find the things that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great set of kind of a recap on the basics, because again, there's always new people who don't necessarily know how this works, and it's not like our documentation is the best in the world. Maybe it should be, but it isn't. So.
What's wrong with that?
No, nothing wrong with our documentation, never been. So Peter Wenstra had a quickly find a parent from the child flow in Power Automate. So if you have multiple flows associated between each other, you can actually, how do you find the parent flow from the child flow? So a nice blog post summary and a reference point with screenshots again, which Peter is always doing on explaining how this actually works. Really, really awesome stuff. Then we had a really cool article from Stefan Power related on SAS.
Yes, exactly. What's new with SAS in SharePoint Framework 1.16.0? So as SPFX evolves, there are new features and also new dependencies that we include in SPFX. And in this case, it's about SAS, right? So this, let's say, CS or improved way to write CSS to have some of these things like inheritance so that you don't need to repeat everything. Right. So what's new in that area of SPFX?
Yep. Really, really good. Thank you, Stefan, on that one. Then 2 weeks ago, we were in Copenhagen, European SharePoint Conference 2022, and Martin Linkstui had a blog post related on what I learned at the ESPC conference in Copenhagen. These are always good stories as well, because they kind of recap the learnings, they recap the things, and what is really, really cool, what was actually covered, what was the key sessions, and then you go back potentially and watching the recording. So thank you, Martin, on that one. Now, Daniel Glenn had an article as well. This is actually interesting. We talked about this one before we started recording.
Exactly. So communities in Microsoft Teams, right? So you might have heard that, you know, right, that there is Microsoft Teams for work, right? So kind of teams that you get with Microsoft 365. But you might or might not know that there's also Teams for Life. I think like at some point that was the official name. I don't know if that's still the official name, but it's kind of Teams that is included with Windows 11, and it's kind of the non-work or basically Teams for outside work. And in this case, it's about how would you use Teams to organize community, right? Like maybe you have a soccer team or hockey team or some kind of other org, right? And you want to have a place to engage online. You can do that nowadays on Teams.
Yep, actually, a really interesting option as well, and it is free. It's free Teams for Life, whatever installation. So really, really cool. And there's a nice interview with Amit Fuley, who's a vice president of product at Microsoft, related on this one. So there's a recording with Daniel Glenn. Now, on the video side, it was surprisingly actually quiet as well. So Shane had a new video 6 days ago, Power Apps example using Canva for design and a full build. So fully built, making things pretty with containers and Canva and Pixabay. So basically building experiences, thinking through how would we use those, and then having a watch on the ads, you know, because ads are important. So but basically creating nice looking applications, and how do we reuse the assets which are coming outside of the Power Apps within the design. Well, that's not nice looking, but you know, there are different options to make things pretty as well. So that's starting to look decent. And then we just had this one opened. This one was related on the Power Platform Managed Environments Control and Visibility, ALM, and the pipelines. All of that is being touched in this Microsoft Mechanics video as well, which was released 4 days ago. But I guess that's it then for this one. So let me actually stop sharing. Last episode. Any last words before we close out for this year?
Stay safe. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year.
Happy holidays, whatever is your chosen celebration. Yeah. And I guess stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see everybody hopefully in January. Let's stay in touch. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.